without further ado, is that how you say it? Further or
Yeah,
do?
I
Yeah,
think it's further
without
ado.
further ado, how we're gonna start this.
Further, I said I do.
Okay. Without further ado, I am so excited for this episode on the Serial Optimist podcast. I have a very, very special guest that is not only a great friend of mine, she is actually my therapist. She is a healer of all things like health, wellness, nutrition, mental. She has also been someone who's kind of been like a business partner for me in helping me evolve and figure out my business. So here we go, Miss Emma Lynn Tureff. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor and an exciting moment in so many ways because, yeah, being part of your life in the ways that I have been able to, getting to be the behind the scenes of your life and then be on said podcast, it's just a really, really huge full circle moment.
It's full circle on so many levels because you and I met in driver's ed when we were 16, 15,
Yeah.
16. That's actually where we met. So that was what, 15 plus years ago, like six,
Yes.
17 years ago.
Yes. Yes. Oh
Yep.
my
It, And then full circle here too. Emma's dad was also my 60s like social studies teacher in high school because she lived in the next town over, but he taught at Greeley at my high school. And so he was my favorite teacher in school. I always loved him. And
God.
then Emma, you and I just I think we connected through a couple different people like
Mhm.
Sarah and our friend group. And then I at the time had a boyfriend and his younger brother was single, like, whatever, looking for someone. And I was like, oh, I have this like really cute, like petite, perfect little friend. She's fun. She's fiery. She's just like, I love her. And I was like, Emma. And I introduced you to Rich. And then you guys literally hit it off and dated
Yeah.
for, what was it, 5 years?
Yeah, like 3.5, almost 4 years. Yeah.
3.5, 4 years. Yeah.
Felt like that
Yeah. And
though.
you guys, yeah. Yeah. We're both not together with those guys, but you and I stayed together forever, which
Yes.
was most important.
Yes. Yeah. Whoa,
Oh my gosh.
you are tripping me out actually, because even though we talk about this stuff, I don't know if we've really thoroughly done that whole timeline in a minute. And the fact that we met at 15 years and now it has been over that amount of time, that amount of years, it's, and you know what's funny is I think our driver's ed was actually in my dad's room.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was in his room.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Classroom. Yes.
Well, we haven't done this timeline in a while because for everyone listening, Emma and I do therapy weekly. And, there's so much that happens now that we go through, but also, of course, kind of the hidden trauma and the hidden work that just you have to do, the deep work. But we never really talk about the timeline. So I was like, I just
Yeah.
want to paint the picture for everyone, the landscape, because it's just that's how far back you and I go. And really, you and I've always just stayed connected throughout the years. And I ended up working with you again when I was at a really pivotal like moment in my life going through, I think it was 2019, going into the pandemic actually.
Mhm.
And you had a plan that you were offering and it was kind of like deep dive. It was like I remember this. It was like, I forgot what the service was
We
that
did
you
the
had.
breakthrough session.
Yeah, the breakthrough session. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like mentally coming unhinged because I was unfulfilled in my career. I was in an unhappy relationship at the
Yeah.
time. And I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't really know what I needed to do. And there was so much in me
Mhm.
that I needed to come out that I'd never talked to anyone before
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And now I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was 20, like, let's just say 2020. I'm like, that was 4 years ago. And like, how
Yeah.
much has changed? And what I wanted to talk about today with you specifically was that time in my life.
Mhm.
I think the biggest issue I was really facing was self-sabotage
Mhm.
and self-sabotaging, which I think so many people don't really realize they do every day if
Mhm.
they haven't done really deep inner work. And so many people don't spend the time or the money. And I just like gave in one day. I was like, this is
Yeah.
something that's hindering me in so much of my life, and I can't pinpoint what it is. So, like, Emma, please like unveil the curtain and help me
Yeah.
figure that out.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I feel like it's really fascinating to hear you talk about our journey, because something that I just wanted to call out, and then we'll get into all the self-sabotagey stuff wherever you want to go with it. I am here to go there. But how unbelievably special it is that we've been able to consistently uphold such a sacred dynamic, and one where you one feel incredibly safe to go to all the depths, and having a dynamic where there is, we've physically known each other in person, in life. We have history with each other. We have times of partying with each other when we were teenagers. And then to cultivate such a high caliber standard for the degree of work that you've committed to, and the degree of work that is within my integrity to create, like, that is why you have changed as much as you have. Well, that is in part, I mean, there's so many reasons why, and we should discuss that as well, like why you've been such an unbelievable testimony and success story. But I really think it's rare, because the way that I work with people in general is a very unconventional therapy in a lot of ways. And to find a way that, even though I desire it to operate outside of the normal boundaries of a dynamic, it doesn't mean that it can't not have its own sacred boundaries for it to be as effective and impactful as it possibly can be. And when you were just saying all that, I was like, wow, it's really impressive, and like that's a whole other area to talk about, to be able to really
Mhm.
respect the work and devote yourself to it, and to take it as serious, is the only way that you can get all the benefit out of it you possibly can. So sorry, I was just like tripping out a little bit while you were talking, because I'm like, that is really impressive, honestly.
No, it is when you look at it from like a holistic level where it's like we used to do like Jaeger bomb shots at 15 years old and now you're my
Ew.
therapist. Like that literally in theory shouldn't make any sense, but
Yeah.
it really does because I feel like you know me and you know who I am to a core and you've seen me at so many different sectors of my life. I've always felt very safe with you. I always felt like you have a very like old soul about you that's just like a very loving and understanding person in general. And it was just, you were someone I didn't care what I told you because you've seen me at like my best and my worst. And it
Mhm.
just, I never felt judged.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important with therapy that people find someone, it doesn't matter who it is. It
Yeah.
really just matters. Do you feel safe enough to
Yeah.
actually be your
Yep.
most authentic self?
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes a really great segue into your comment about where you were at when we started this. Because now that I remember it, you
Mhm.
actually joined like a small group program with me.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
probably a few years before that. And then we started working together one on one really consistently during that other season. I think that you were in a relationship with someone, like you were in a very different place in between those two times. But so we've worked together in so many different capacities as well, and
Yeah.
just continued to upwardly evolve. And the work that we've done is just so unbelievably deep and so serious, so important. And I mean, again, you are just the proof of it. But in terms of the moment when you came into the commitment to really go all in and work together in a consistent way, and decide, like, I'm actually going to devote myself entirely to therapy, which I think in it of itself is such a moment of collapsing in a lot of ways, finally surrendering, I think, is a really good way of saying it, because I think all
Yeah.
of us can relate to these moments of our life where we're trying to say, like, I can hold it together, I can read another book, I can watch another podcast, I can do this, and we sort of like, okay, let's go. Like, we have those moments where probably on a consistent basis, when you're in that kind of season of life, it's like you are almost this like manic cheerleader for yourself. There's times where you're breaking down, there's times where you're like, I've
Right.
got this, I can pull it together, like I can do this. And that moment when you finally just go, I this is beyond me. It feels like too much for me. I'm really going to devote myself to actually thoroughly getting help. And it's not to say that everybody needs help. This is an interesting conversation that I always have with myself, of this idea of like what humans quote unquote need. But I do believe that the reality is there are some things that just genuinely can only be healed while being witnessed with someone else, because so much of a lot of our struggles involve relationships with other people, interpersonal relationships. And so we're not going to heal them independently. We're not going to heal them by ourselves in the room by figuring out everything within our own heads, where the problem lies within our own heads. If you have an issue with vulnerability or trust or not feeling like you are loved or seen, you cannot give yourself those things by yourself. So, in some ways, as much as I guard against this idea that, like, you need me, I've made that post that I remember you even commenting on it, because I was like, you don't need me. You don't need other people. At the same time, it is inherently healing in ways that cannot otherwise occur when you don't have someone else. And that moment when you finally surrender is usually the moment when you finally say, I feel like this is beyond me. And there's also something that has to be present still, even if you feel like a total mess and like worthless, if you feel the worst about yourself, there still must be something that hasn't given up on yourself to go, I'm going to
Mm.
invest in a different reality. And I always say when people, choose to invest with me, it's like that is such a massive signifier that you are going to literally invest and fully believe in this future. Otherwise, you wouldn't be paying for it. You wouldn't choose to go forward and do that unless there was a part of you that was literally saying, I am committed enough to creating a different reality for myself.
I mean, 100%. And I think it's the same thing with like personal training, or it's the same
Mhm.
thing with like eating healthy. You either can spend the money or you're not, and you're investing in your health and your wellness. It's the same thing with therapy. It's you're investing in yourself in another way, and that's how you have to look at it. And that's you have to be ready for that, though. You have to be
Yeah.
willing and that surrender. And it's so funny that you say the manic cheerleader, because that was me. That was like, I'm fine, everything's great, I'm so fine, everything's awesome, like I'm great, like, and it was like
Mhm.
I was always great. And I remember I actually had a couple friends who were just like, Steph, you're always great, like you're never
Yeah.
like you're like this hyped up version of
Yeah.
yourself all the time, which can't
Mhm.
be real. And it
Mhm.
was hard for people to penetrate like the real me, because I was so afraid for people to actually see how broken I really was on the inside and really what was going on internally. And
Mhm.
that was the moment, I think, when they said that to me, and then I had just really looked at my life when we started really going seriously, I was like, something isn't working and it's me. And that's the one common denominator in this whole thing is me. That's all I can really look at. There's stuff maybe maybe that's not the right person in my life, or maybe that's not the right career. But at the end of the day, you are stuck with you always. And so if
Yeah.
you aren't at least like auditing yourself and like investigating yourself first and going there and being like, okay, like let me do my checks and balances of where I'm actually at. And then if that's all good, or like you figure out whatever you need to figure out, it's like, okay, now you can look at the rest of the stuff. But I feel like until you really have that really stark look at yourself in the mirror of who you are and who you want to be, you really can't move forward and really progressing your life to a degree that you're like at the worthiness that you really have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, I see this work. There's so many different stages and areas that it benefits such a massive tripwire in so many other areas of your life. But I think the starting point is finally giving yourself an option to come undone. Like, truly, I see
Mhm.
that so deeply is literally just, can you finally kind of throw up the white flag and say, I'm done. I'm done like trying to hold this together. I'm white knuckling my life. I'm fixating on my house is on fire and I'm running outside to let everyone else know it's totally fine, while running back in and managing everything and seeing that it's burning down faster than I can manage. And I don't know how to finally just stop and acknowledge that it all feels like too much. And something that I've spent a long time sort of studying within myself and studying patterns within my clients is how that pattern just gets so ramped up and out of hand and is so deeply wired to our, core wounds. Like, it made complete sense that you had gone so long in your life trying to
Mhm.
fixate and perpetuate on this external story, and goodness, the energy that it takes to manage that external while trying your very best to also care for yourself internal. It's not like you're ignoring that internal stuff, but there often comes a time where it's too much all at once. And I think that in a lot of ways, what I've come to is like we are probably wired to need one another. Like we're,
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people finally come to that place where they decide to get support, whether it's with a friend, whether whatever their come undone moments are, connection, they finally give in and say, this isn't working, like you said. But to finally get to that place where you decide this isn't working usually comes with a change in relationships and connection.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Yep.
that is an inherently divine thing, I think. I think we're wired to need to lean on other people because what would we be? And also we'd be missing the point in this reality in so many ways if we never had to get to that place. So I think it's there's also something really beautiful that you can see in each of those moments where it's like maybe life was needing to get so out of hand for you so that you would finally give
Mhm.
yourself that, because look how healing it has been for you to experience being
Yeah.
deeply not only invested in your own worth, in your own life, and going, my life deserves this, and I deserve to give myself this life, but to have someone who is equally as invested in you. Like it's so, it's, I say to you all the time, it's the gift of my lifetime as well to love you and support you and see that you're going to have everything that you desire to have in this life. So I'm glad that it took whatever it took for you to get to experience being cared for and loved and supported in that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had that.
No, no. And I think you're so right though on like the human connection because I think, you know, as millennials, we've been told like it's lonely at the top. It's,
Yeah.
they all these like quotes that you can go through life alone and sometimes it's very lonely when you're building success and I'm like I used to really feel that way and I was like, it is lonely building this and sometimes you do have lonely roads and that's
Hmm.
normal. But I also was just not around the right people. That was a big part of healing for
Yeah.
me is that I kept
Yeah.
keeping people in my life that were no longer serving me in a way that they were actually toxic and
Hmm.
really not great people for me. They weren't loving me the way that I needed. I think something that's so important for people to find out about themselves is there's one thing to have love, but it's really like, how do you actually want to receive the love? Like, love is one thing in a
Hmm.
box above, but it's like, how do you want to be receiving it? Through friendships, through, companions, through partners, whatever that is, you have to be understanding of really actually how do you want to receive it? Like, oh, well, my friend says they love me and my friends did this for me once, but it's like, does that actually matter to you? Does that
Hmm.
actually mean anything to you
Yeah.
to the core?
Yeah. Does it actually
And
communicate to you?
yeah, does it actually count for anything? Because it's like, oh, to them that was showing that they cared, but to
Yeah.
you that actually wasn't. And so I think that was a big thing for me and you is working with you is really unpacking some like trauma with
Hmm.
friendships, with relationships, and really figuring out like, how do I need and want to be loved? And what does that
Yeah.
look like? And then I'm actually not going to feel so lonely. Like I'm in the most abundant time in my life with friends, with people, with my community. And it's so funny because, 2 years ago when you and I went like full steam ahead, we
Yeah.
invested so much energy and time. That was
Mhm.
like my pivotal moment of like I went all in. Like
Yeah.
we've worked together kind of sporadically through the years, but the last 2 years has been like every week
Yeah.
dedicated an hour to you and me or more. And
Yeah.
so I that my biggest thing was feeling like I was alone, like no one understood me. I didn't have the community that I wanted. This was 2 years into my relationship with Blake and things were great with him and I felt like I had finally found like a great partner, but like my friendships were really not in a place I wanted. My career was still in kind of a place where I didn't really want it. And I'm like, shit, is this
Hmm.
my life where I only get the one really good thing? Like
Mm.
you look at it, it's like, oh, you can't have it all. But I'm like, but I
Yeah.
feel like you can.
Yeah. And like,
And
whoa, in 2 years, look how all you have acquired.
I'm so grateful because you have opened my eyes. You allowed me the space to surrender. I made some really difficult choices that I was terrified to do, which was walk away from friendships that just again, and when I say not serving me, I always feel like sometimes I can come off as like, well, they're not doing stuff for me. It's like, that's not actually what I mean. What I mean is they don't have the same mentality or interests that I do anymore. And maybe they were a great friend at some point in my life along the journey. Not every friend is supposed to continue with you on that train.
Yeah.
And then there are some friends that are just they hold a certain place in your life, but they're not more than that. And
Hmm.
I wanted something more. I wanted friendships and community that felt nurturing and loving and supportive. And I've always been a hype girl for everyone, and I just wanted that for myself. I was
Yeah.
like, how can I be like this for so many people? And I just feel like no one is really doing that for me. And now I have like the best community of girls and people in my life who just like amp me up, who are excited for me. And it's not this, because I think as you're growing and as you're evolving, you'll notice this in friendships, especially as you do a lot of inner work like we have done,
Hmm.
that you end up being a mirror for other people and they start to push you away. You start to trigger people. They
Yeah.
start to be like, oh, I don't want to be
Mhm.
around you. You're,
Yeah.
doing this, blah, blah, blah.
Then you start
And I
growing.
never was like, I'm better than you. It's just like I am evolving and I would love to see you evolve too with whatever is going to make you happy. But as a projector, I have to know sometimes to sit back and let people just do what they're going to do. But for me, the friendships I had at the time just really were not serving the greater purpose of growth that I wanted to see in my own life. And
Yeah.
it's just crazy in 2 years what can change.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was interesting. You know me. I'm always taking notes, even when I am on a podcast. But I have
Yeah.
to remember things. And I was just listening to everything you're saying. I'm gonna try not to like go into that mode where I'm just in complete awe and like seeing all the dots connect as you're talking. But um, a few things you said there that I think are really important to kind of illuminate is truly for you, Steph, I can see that everything began to change in the moment where you came undone and felt safe enough. The quote of like, shame dies in rooms where you are, feel safe to be witnessed. As long as there is this underlying feeling that is motivating your every action, that is this belief that, I can't be truly loved for who I am. So I'm always going to have to work 10 times harder to create this image of myself while also dealing with my actual reality behind the scenes, which is incredibly insufficient and unsustainable. When you finally came undone and we really worked through your authentic truth in the beginning, which just looked like you sharing that with me, you having a safe place to go, there's this and there's this and there's this and this feels really icky and I'm really shameful about this and there's imposter syndrome here and there's a fear that if I actually, you just actually started with one relationship where you were entirely truthful. And
Hmm.
then through that, which is why I think the relationship dynamic between anyone where you are able, like a therapist and a client dynamic, is not just the tools and the conversations you have and all that. It's also, that's a relationship. It's a real person who is listening and hopefully making you feel like they're invested and deeply care about you, and that creates an evidence of proof that you might have never had before of, whoa, wait, she actually knows everything and like
Hmm.
she still thinks I'm special, and then I'm calling you out on a regular basis. I see this in you and this in you, and you're the most amazing person. You're like, this person who knows everything about me that I thought no one could ever know about me is seeing that, not running, and actually they're obsessed with me and they think I'm the coolest person in the world. Like, okay, so you started leaning into one, coming to complete truth, not only to yourself but also where you could be witnessed by another human being, and it was overly accepted. And that is the start of where you started being able to create authentic relationships, because yeah, you can never experience being truly loved in the way that you desired, which is being authentically loved for who you actually are, which is what we all want to feel like someone actually, that's where safety comes from. They actually love who I am. If you're never showing them who you are, then there's always going to be
Yeah.
this underlying fear. And I think in a lot of ways, those relationships that you talk about that don't always last when we grow, they're, I agree. I have the same stance on the way that I see how relationships are meant to operate in our lives and the gift of them and the purpose of them. And I think a lot of times, while you still have those wounds, it's very easy to keep relationships, especially very long standing relationships, where you manifested them into your life when they were a match for a certain part of you or a version of you that you no longer are. So those are really
Yeah.
tricky because then the only way for those to continue to be aligned, which is like similar to what you're saying, you're like, it's not that like they didn't serve me, but it's like they were no longer aligned for you,
Yeah.
is other if they don't grow with you, if they haven't evolved to be a match for this new version of you, the danger is they end up continuing to be this self-fulfilling prophecy of your
Hmm.
fears, of your old beliefs. And they were doing that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and because I think people people forget how much you can change, and that's not like, oh, you've changed, like it's a bad thing. It's like I've evolved and I've
Yeah.
become more of who I am than I ever was
Yeah.
before. I mean, face it, like let's face it, like when I was in my late teens, 20s, I was not like where I am now. I think I was who I was, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of shame. I had a lot of family trauma, and I was like, drinking and partying and doing a lot of stuff in that time frame to really mask what was actually happening and not really dealing with it, because at 21 years old, and this is like pre where therapy was like really openly talked about and actually like a
Mm-hmm.
normalized thing, it was just like, okay, you just go, like, I've had a bad day, I'm going to go get drunk with my friends, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm like not doing well in this, I'm going to go do this. And it's just, it was not a healthy, it was really unhealthy coping mechanisms that I had. And I'm not saying like there's anything wrong with going and having a drink, but I was drinking in excess
Mm-hmm.
to mask a lot of deep, deep rooted stuff. And people saw me as like, oh, but you're always happy and always partying, so like you must love your life. I was like, yeah, that was like the inauthentic self of Steph, of just trying to put on a brave face because I was screaming on the inside, and like I had no one I could actually talk to about this. And so now looking, 10 years forward, I've grown and evolved so much where I really don't drink. I have like, not pregnant, obviously I don't drink at all, but even
You're like,
when
not
I'm
that
not,
often.
it's like yeah. But it's like, when I do, it's like I have like a glass of wine like once a quarter maybe. Like I have it like every couple months. And that's, for me, that's my lifestyle, because I love running, I love working out, I love feeling good, and alcohol just doesn't make me feel good. And some people love it and they have no problem, and I love that for them. Alcohol just doesn't love me. And I think there's a very deep rooted reason for that, because my body knows what I used to use it for, which was like a mask. And so looking at these old friendships that I held on for decades, and them seeing me still as like Steph's this wild party girl, and then I stopped doing that altogether and became this new version of myself, I think it shocked a lot of people. And also people are like, well, you're not fun anymore, you're not doing this, or would almost like shame me into like wanting to be my old self, when really that was never truly who I was supposed to be. And
Yeah.
that's the hard part of growth, is when
Yeah.
people want to hold you back to their comfort level of what they know you as, when you've just evolved and changed, and you have to be like, nope, that's just not who I am, and
Yeah.
not who I am anymore. And at the time, that was actually a really good safety for my brain and for my soul. And that's where like your body and your brain will always keep you safe in that. And that was
Mm-hmm.
like my own like box of safety. I wasn't ready to talk about everything. Now I've shed all of my skin. I, am sober from all that stuff. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
binge drinking every weekend like I was before. It's like I'm in a place now where I can actually be raw and really feel everything.
Yeah.
And that is when the breakthroughs happen.
Yeah, you didn't have to run from anything.
Right.
And you made a really, really huge point because I think so many people are operating in this constant need to try to avoid these deeper things, which makes them have to kind of like consistently be running from their life, right? And your ability to go, I'm actually going to stop running away from everything, all of these things that I'm
Hmm.
afraid are going to catch up with me. I'm going to stop and I'm actually going to turn around and I'm going to walk directly into them. And that's where you become so unbelievably powerful and you build such in even just those instant moments, you immediately build a sense of trust and safety within yourself. Like, oh, I could handle
Yes.
that. Like, bring on the next thing. But Nietzsche said, I always say, I don't think I'm saying his name correctly, but he is one of my faves. And he says that sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. And we've talked about this
Hmm.
so much in our work, especially with you as a projector and getting you to like really understand
Yeah.
who you are and what this design of yours is all about. And you are such a class A projector, like you are to a T. And a lot of the components of that have made you realize, like, yeah, that's exactly what I was experiencing. But people are always going to be triggered by us. And sometimes we trigger people into believing in themselves, and we trigger people into showing them what is possible for them and inspiring them, and trigger them into action, and we trigger them into betterment, and we trigger them into healing. And sometimes we trigger people based on who they are and where they're at and their relationship to assimilating the trigger. We also can have an equally powerful impact in triggering people to realize that, wow, all these things that they said that they couldn't do or they didn't believe was possible, well, you're standing in front of them and you're proving that they are possible, and you're proving that their excuses are invalid, and
Yeah.
you're proving that it could be a different way. And that is incredibly intense for people to have to sit and deal with. And so instead, because you're showing them a whole different truth that goes against what they've been telling themselves forever, and in order to accept that, they would have to literally acknowledge that they have built their life around, to some degree, a lie, a protection mechanism from what is actually possible for them. And that's too much for them to
Yeah.
look at and take ownership and accountability for, that they just have to shut you down. I think a lot of times people feel shut down by people and then take it personally, and then it triggers up your insecurities, and then you make stories off of that, like, I'm unlovable, da 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 da. And the pattern of
Hmm.
self-fulfilling prophecies just continue on and on and on. But if we can
Yep.
stop it in that moment and pause and go, okay, wait, what meaning was I making out of that? And making sure that on a consistent basis, we're making the correct meaning. And we also realize just that people are constantly being triggered by us, whether it's for good or for quote unquote, in an uncomfortable way, but it's not bad either way. And I think that that's really huge to see, like, that's part of the role that we are intended to play in people's lives.
No, you're 100% correct on that because I think I've seen this, in my own work with you. I've taken so much accountability and awareness to myself and where like you sometimes have to, and I think for the best healing that anyone can do, it's like at the end of the day, it's your fault, but in a good way,
Yeah.
for you, like how you react, how you feel about this. Like it's actually on you to really look at that. But I think so many people, and I was this way, so that's how I can see it in other people, where it's like you don't want to be the reason that it's at your fault that you're feeling this way. So I'm going to push it on them and be like, well, you're
Mhm.
making me feel this way. And it's allowing that victim mentality to continue playing on in your head and
Mhm.
giving people the almost like the excuse to have the excuse and to live in that space where at the end of the day it's not serving them, it's not making them any happier, it's unfortunately probably unraveling in
Yeah.
other ways in relationships, in work. And that's the biggest thing I always advise anyone. If you are struggling in a lot of aspects of your life, like your career, relationships, maybe intimate relationships, and just like your own self worth, insecurity. It's like the best thing you can do is to actually do inner work therapy
Mhm.
because that's going to allow you to really unveil like what the deep reason is. Because a lot of it has nothing to actually do with right now, has to do with your inner child from
Yeah.
years ago of, well, my mom told me I wasn't good enough, or my grandmother used to tell me I looked fat when I wore this. And now this
Mhm.
girl has body image issues the rest of her life because she created, heard this one thing
Right.
or multiple things, and now that's her
Mhm.
narrative for her whole life.
Right.
And if you don't actually realize or do the work to realize that was actually not true, that was just probably a really mean thing someone said to
Right.
you, but you painted the whole rest of the portrait in that light. And now you have to basically get a blank canvas and start from scratch. And
Yeah.
that's scary for people. They don't want to
Yeah.
do that. They're like, I'd rather live in my stark reality that I'm not really happy with than literally uproot all of these feelings and have to actually deal
Right.
with them again right now.
Yeah, and take action on things. I'm
Hmm.
sorry that my voice is like apparently being lost, but I will fight through. I just might not sound the best. I just talked a lot yesterday, and we're dealing with a little raspy voice, but I'm just gonna trust that it sounds sexy. It's fine. What you were saying is so huge because when people have a lot of insecurities, which we all absolutely do. The
Hmm.
image that I see is almost like we have it sounds kind of weird, and I don't know. Sometimes my metaphors are just bizarre, and I
I
apologize.
love your metaphors. They're my
This
favorite part of you, are your metaphors.
this one's funky. It's not one of my incredibly vile and inappropriate ones, but I picture
Lost.
I picture like walking down the street, and if you have little like potholes of wounds inside yourself, when someone drives by and there's a puddle nearby and they splash you, if you have a lot of these holes of insecurity, it's going to get in you. No matter what it
Hmm.
is, it's going to get in and it's going to take root, right? But if you are filled in, meaning you've healed those insecurities, the water goes right off you. It just splashes right
Yeah.
off. So
Yeah.
until we all individually heal that, we're just walking around making inaccurate meaning based on our insecurity, because the way that the brain works is essentially our subconscious mind's job is to prove to us our reality. Our subconscious mind's job is to make whatever we have said is truth, truth. And that is why when they say, like, we're all living in our own reality, one of my favorite ways to frame this is your truth is stronger than your reality. We all have the same thing that we're all dealing
Mhm.
with in the outside world. It could be objective, but every single person has a completely different experience with that. And their experience with that is their life, is their truth, is their reality. When you were saying that, I was like breaking that down. And, a lot of our work is sort of this blend between psychology and trauma healing and neuroscience. And I just want to break this down for people because this isn't
Mhm.
this isn't some people. This is all of us. We all have negative biased based brains because our brain's job is to keep us alive. It's
Mhm.
going to do what it needs to do even when what we are looking at as our desire is like, well, that sounds great. I want that for myself. It's important to understand that if it's not working out for you, if you keep sabotaging, like you were talking about, the reason why that is because some part of your brain has seen that as a threat to your survival. And it sees everything that is not familiar as a threat to your survival. So, someone says something, it triggers up an insecurity in you. You've probably, in some weird way, manifested them in your life, someone who's going to
Mhm.
bring up that in you because you believe that that's the way the world works and you believe you deserve that. So it comes in, someone does this thing, says this thing, it triggers up an insecurity. And like you said, especially when we're younger, we're in a state 0 to 7 where our brains are just sponges. And this is important because we essentially take in the outside world at rapid speed and we create a manual a mental manual of how to operate in the world. And if we didn't do that, if we didn't have this time period when we were in that state of mind that was just absorbing and developing essentially our hardware for life, we wouldn't know how to be accepted in society. We wouldn't know how to receive love
Right.
and attention and the things that were necessary for survival. The problem is your belief literally becomes highlighted throughout your life because there are mechanisms of the brain, your subconscious, your reticular activating system, that are going to literally seek that as proof. That's just going to show you, yes, what you believe is true. Yes, that people who hurt you are always in your life. Yes, everyone thinks that you're a piece of shit. Yes, you're ugly. Yes, you're this. And so we essentially warp every single experience until we do the deep work to heal and reframe, like you said, to a other potential reality, because there are so many potential realities of what is actually true, the meaning that you make from something. Until you do that work, you're just going to be living in these consistent self-fulfilling prophecies of what
Yep.
was wired into you when you were so young. And most of us, whatever those things were, are completely rooted in trauma and need some serious reframing and healing to, in order to have a new reality be able to manifest itself. Does that make sense?
No, that makes total sense. And I mean, for me specifically, because we've done so much work together,
Yeah.
but I think from like a like macro level, I think everyone can understand that and see that, how we have gone through life up until now is a direct correlation and reflection of who we were before. And that's not to say that we can't change, which is why we do the work so we can evolve and get better and heal. But there's a really good reason that certain people and in general, everyone reacts to something like,
Yeah.
oh, when someone makes you feel left out. And maybe you were left out as a child, and now as an adult, just the smallest little interaction that maybe is perceived of being left out, or now you're going to actually seek that you're being left out because
Right.
that is a self fulfilling prophecy
Yeah.
that your brain has told you is always going to be a reality versus just
Hmm.
owning up and being like, I don't accept that. I don't
Hmm.
accept that. And that is not true. And if that is how I truly feel after you do that, it's like, okay, maybe those aren't my people that are going to make me not feel that way. Like I need to be around people who don't make me feel that way. So there's so much work that I think everyone needs to
Yeah.
do. I mean, I look at it in my own life and, relationships, and I really try to look at this from, me, I'm very objective. I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of my superpowers. I'm
It is.
very objective. And I really try to take so much responsibility on myself to improve so that way I can improve my own environment. And that's a direct correlation between
Hmm.
trauma, though, like a control of trying to control your environment and sometimes just things you can't control. But the thing you can control is how you react to them and how you perceive them and what you take away from it. And a lot of times when situations happen, you have to remind yourself like that's actually not your reality. Okay, they were really mean to you and said like, they don't like you or they don't hate you. I don't want them to like me because they're actually not a good person. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if they don't like me. They, what they perceive of me is not going to diminish how I perceive myself,
Hmm.
and I think that's something that people have said for years. It's like, I forgot that quote where it's like, how, perception's reality, but it's like,
Yeah.
if the reality skewed, like the perception actually doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
I just feel
Yeah.
like as long as you know who you are, you're living to your core and you feel good at the end of the day, like that's all that matters. And
Mhm.
I try really hard to just be a good person and want to be a good person and improve my life in every possible way I can through business, through relationships, through my, future marriage. And that it all comes from a lot of inner work and healing that I think everyone should do.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I think you make a very amazing case for the fact that as you first really accept who you are and then do the work to like love yourself, see the love out of yourself, highlight, illuminate,
Yeah.
make it seen on a regular basis. That's a training that we have to do for our brain. It's an intentional thing to make it so that we really see ourselves. And there's something that you said earlier that I think was like really important to express, that you were saying, there's these pieces of us um of like who we are, and they might not be like these greatest traits, or I was this way and whatever, I want to decide that I want to be different. And that's another piece of this conversation, is like we choose the meaning. We also have to choose that we can decide to reinvent ourselves. We can decide, I don't
Mhm.
really care to be this person and I want to choose to be this person, and so I'm going to work hard to take my mental hardware and update it, which takes work. Like, it's not a
Yep.
simple process, but there is a process that works. the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand in that beginning phase of coming undone, dealing with who you are, dealing with these things that are deeply unsettling to you, shameful for you, embarrassing for you, are not working for you, make you stressed and feel not safe with yourself and your life. The truth of the matter is a lot of us are not aware of who we actually are, because so many of
Mm,
us are just an accumulation of who we told we are, who we were told that we are, but also a huge percentage of many of our personalities, which you were just touching on in, this control side of you, who we see as that's just who I am, that's my personality. No, that's actually a symptom of trauma. No,
yeah.
that's actually in large part a byproduct of this experience and this experience and this experience. So who are we actually? Because when you were born, you were not, quote unquote, this person that you were at 8 because of this thing that happened. That's not about who you
Mm,
are. That is a symptom of trauma. So
yeah.
it's really important for people to understand that in a lot of ways, we have to have a complete new way of looking and doing, like you said, a lot of introspection and kind of clearing out and separating what is what, to really come to terms with, like, at its core and baseline, who am I actually? Because I
Yeah.
have been living out this pattern, which has led me to people in my life who then affirm that that's who I am, and I don't even really see myself as that. When you start seeing yourself
Mhm.
differently, you will start experiencing that then the way people look at you is different, right? Like, you can attest that
Yeah.
the way people mirror who you actually are, which is really the only way that we see ourselves in this life, is through the eyes of a mirror, right? You wouldn't know what you look like if you didn't have a mirror. We wouldn't know who
Yeah.
we are if someone didn't say that. But if you see yourself differently, all of a sudden you look around and your friends start confirming that that is now how they see you as well.
Yeah. And I think one of like the best examples of that is like for me, I grew up, obviously, I'm a redhead, and there are so many things that people can say about
Yeah.
redheads. And I remember being in high school and people saying a certain thing about redheads, and I didn't know who I was. I was 17 years old, and
Mhm.
I started to manifest, this is my personality, this is who I
Right.
am. And then as you get into your 20s and you start continuing to grow up, there's parts of you that people are told, like, tell you who you are,
Mhm.
and then one day you just have enough and you look at it. Like I remember this
Mhm.
example, and I remember you and I were working together. This was actually, I think, 2017. This is actually when we really
Yeah,
started working together. It's 2017.
I remember
And I had a moment where I was supposed to go to like this party with, like, my mom had visited in town. I was with this boyfriend at the time and like these people. And I remember I got so sick right before. I had the worst stomach ache. I felt like
that.
crap. And what you and I did for inner work at that time that I remember was I was not being truthful to truly who I am and what I wanted to do. Like, I am a very good extroverted person. A lot of people know that. I'm very
Mhm.
personable. I'm also very introverted and I need a lot of alone time,
Yeah,
and I like to be home. I'm more of a homebody. That's just my
yeah.
personality. And I'm a creative. Like, I like writing for like 4 hours on like a Friday night, like in my like cave of my house,
Ah, you're such
with
a
a little bit of
second
light,
line.
like
Yep.
with like a little like light music or like a little show going, and like making tea with Blake. Like, that is like my life that I love. And I think at that time I didn't really know who I was, and I was trying to like fit this mold that, like, oh well, you're outgoing, so you're gonna want to go to the party, and like my mom wanted to go and everyone wanted to go, and I was like literally throwing up in the bathroom because I had so much
Mhm.
anxiety, and I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? Why am I stressing out about something that doesn't really matter? And it wasn't that it didn't matter, it was I was trying to force myself into this mold of who I really wasn't, to make everyone else happy around me. And in reality, I was making myself miserable trying to fit into this mold and not just being like, you know what, I don't want to go. Actually, I would rather stay in and order food and have a movie. But at the time, FOMO was like a huge thing in my life. I was
Yeah.
always afraid I was going to miss out, and I was missing out of like who I was supposed to be. But in reality, who I was supposed to be was to stay home. And now when people talk about FOMO in 2024, I literally laugh because I'm like, I literally don't have FOMO for anything.
I
I'm like,
literally have
I,
fear of being invited. So,
yeah, I fear being invited, exactly. Like if I want to go do something, I'll go do it. If I don't, I don't. And that was something that you and I really, really worked through a lot during that time period where I got comfortable saying no. It was okay to
yeah.
say no that I didn't want to go do something, or it was okay to say no that like, you know what, I don't have an interest in that because in high
Mhm.
school, you're around the same friends and you really feel like you don't have an option but to follow the pack of what you guys are doing or to try to do what everyone else is doing. I did always feel like went to the beat of my own drum in high school. I was pretty
Yeah.
independent, but I still felt like I was very much influenced by like boyfriends or if they wanted to do something I didn't want to, but I would still do it, like going to something.
Yeah.
And so now in my adulthood, I was like, I literally don't have to do something if I don't want to. And I tell people that now when they're like, well, I feel they told me that I should, or they're making, if someone makes you feel bad about having to go do something you don't want to do, I don't agree with that in any
Yeah.
way. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, that is a sign of healing because something to expose here that I think hopefully is really relatable to a lot of people, and I think it is that FOMO. And I think it's understandable when that's something, those are things that you genuinely enjoy doing and you genuinely want to do, and maybe in your season of life where you're working really hard and you're like, oh, I don't want to miss the party, I love going to those things. That's a different situation. That
Yes.
anxiety of I have to go to this thing that I don't even want to go to is often sourced from the fact that you're feeling an overwhelming pressure to be able to defend and keep up with an external image and story of yourself. You're thinking,
Hmm.
if I don't go to this party, how are people going to talk about me? Are they going to forget about my existence? Are they going to talk bad about
Hmm.
me? I have to physically be at all of these different things to try to manage my persona and my image to the outside world and
Yeah.
to perfect it and to put on a whole freaking show. And if I don't go, then I'm going to leave people up to their own ideas, and I never feel safe to do that. Whereas when you're comfortable with who you are, you're like, I don't give a fuck what people are going to say about me because I'm
Hmm.
so rooted in the truth. When you're not rooted in the truth of it, there's almost that, like, it's not a guilty conscience because it's not about guilt, but it's that same unrest because you feel like you have to consistently manage that. And
Yeah.
um, I think a big note on that is also this concept of self loss or self abandonment. And I think that's a really big thing for people to look out for, is
Hmm.
recognizing, I do a lot of work with people on really, really deep diving self sabotage, like you were saying, because it's not just as simple as these symptoms, but it's these symptoms in our life that are self-sabotage, but it's the fact that they're a direct little breadcrumb back to our deepest subconscious wiring, which is how you change your whole life, is getting to that root. And one of the main reasons why people self-sabotage, there are sort of like these core reasons, and one of them is abandonment. And I think when people have such intense abandonment wounds, which can come from many things that I think a lot of people don't always recognize, because we think of abandonment as like this one big thing. And if you've had it, then you're like, yes, my father left me, my mother left me, I've had abandonment. But a lot of times there are so many forms that people don't recognize that's what they're dealing with. And these people who have these micro or macro experiences of abandonment in their life are often quick to choose to self abandon over be abandoned by others or make others feel
Hmm.
abandoned. And so that
Yes.
pattern of where is there consistent self loss, whether that is, I didn't speak my truth, I didn't say no, I didn't not go when I didn't feel like going. I am literally forcing myself against my will to live in a certain way, to do certain things. And just think about what your relationship would be like with any person who was doing that to you, who was forcing you to go to things when you didn't feel good, who was forcing you to be friends with people who made you feel bad about yourself, who was forcing you to do things that you were physically uncomfortable with. There are so many ways where, people talk about self-trust being so important. But to me, one of the ways that I have like finally come to after years of doing this work with people in at least an attempt to explain what it is that I do, is ultimately I want people to feel safe in their own hands. Because if you do not feel like you and your life is safe in your own hands, I don't think there is a worse feeling in this world than feeling like I'm not going to give myself the life that I desire. And that's going to give
Mm.
me constant anxiety, constant depression, constant lack of satisfaction. It's devastating. So, building up self trust in that degree of seriousness. Like, I need to know that not only do I feel protected, but my life is in good hands. And that's something you've
Yeah.
consistently created within yourself, is shown yourself. I can make you feel safe. I can stand up for you. I can give you all the things you dreamed of. I'm going to go after these things because I know you want them and you deserve them, babe. Like, that is self love at its highest.
Well, and thank you for saying that. And I think, so many people like you see it on social media and you see it in general where it's like, someone's been in all these relationships like, oh, you need to work on yourself, you need to be alone. And like no one really talks about like what that means.
Yeah.
And
No,
and
they
I don't
don't.
think you necessarily need to be alone to do that. Like, I mean, I'm doing this while in a relationship now newly engaged.
Yep.
Like I have such and that was something with, you know, you and I did so much work from like 2017 to like 2020 and then I went really 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 deep the last 2 years. But I promised myself in the next relationship, I was going to be the most authentic person I could ever possibly be.
Yeah.
I was going to show them all the sides of me, whether it's pretty or not. That is just who I am because
Yeah.
everyone has those sides. And I
Yes.
think that's like when you can be safe enough and you're insecure enough in your own like place internally and body, everything where you're like, this is me, these are the cards I was dealt, this is stuff I'm working on and I'm trying to improve on. This is also just this is who I am and how I'm wired. You either
Mm-hmm.
take it or leave it. And I think so many people are, and I've seen this for years that people in unhappy marriages and unhappy relationships. And I was always like, why stay? Like, why are you doing this? And then you look at like the underbelly of the beast of it all, and it's like, wow, these are just really fractured people, not relationships that now just inherently are going to get fractured because if you don't do the inner work, all this other stuff comes out. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
when you look at a marriage that's not working, it's like, okay, well, what's like the deep rooted issues of like maybe individually and then to collectively, how do you move forward and work on that? Like Blake knows I've been in therapy. He is very supportive. I literally every time I get off of a call with you, he's like, do you need to talk about anything? Do you want to talk about
This is
anything?
the most
And to
amazing
me,
thing. Can everyone just hear that
I'm,
for a second? Because I'm obsessed with this. The aftercare and the desire. Um, there's a book called All About Love, and they define that love is that which nurtures your growth. And I think,
Mhm.
we are in these dynamics, relationship dynamics, not for the ways that we all see. Ideally, it makes us so happy and all these things. But at its core, the purpose of these relationships are to help us evolve in our own human experiences and understanding and healing. And the fact that Blake does that, like, did everyone just hear that? He comes in after every therapy session and wants to integrate. That aftercare is just heavenly.
He is amazing. And anyone that knows Blake knows that he's a great human being, but he's an even better partner. I mean, he has been hit like he has been the most supportive and loving and genuinely nurturing partner that I've always
Yeah.
needed. But I think
Yeah.
what makes it feel so safe is I've always been someone in relationships from like my late teens to basically 30s where physical intimacy was the only intimacy I really knew. I knew like, oh, we could be friends and go do something fun together, or, we're physically intimate. There was like black and white.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
never truly knew true intimacy until I started dating Blake, which was like a mental intimacy of like connection, of asking about deep stuff, having really difficult conversations. Like Blake and I are no relationship's perfect, but for us, what's really allowed us to succeed and grow is that we're willing to be ugly together and we're
Yeah.
willing to be like unveil who we really are and work through that and be very honest. Where I see this in a lot of relationships where they're so afraid to just be honest about what they need in the relationship that they never get it. And then that's when you see
Yeah.
people drift away. They, infidelity happens. People just
Mhm.
aren't willing to actually just say, "Hey, I actually don't like when you do that." Or, "Hey,
Yeah.
I really love when you do this. If you could do more of this." I think just like the honest
Mhm.
communication is like the number one thing in a healthy
Mhm.
relationship. But I just
Yeah.
could talk about Blake all day because I just
I
love
love
him
it.
and he is just such a
No.
great partner. And it's allowed me though to thrive. Like I talked about this before. I'm like, my company wouldn't be my company without Blake. And I say that not to discredit the work that I've done, but to
Mhm.
credit him as truly a friend and partner where he allowed me the space and security to feel like I can go out on my own. And if I fall on my face, I still have a place to come home to that makes me feel good and
Yeah.
that also supports me and nourishes me to like, no, you have wings, you can go do it, and I'm still
Yeah.
here for you, like go and do it, like that. It's like that interconnected independence that everyone needs and should have in a relationship to be yourself, to go off and do these amazing dreams,
Yeah.
but also still have an anchor at home.
This is so huge, Steph, because what you are describing, what you've gotten from Blake and what you have in your life. So I'm trying to figure out how to word this because my brain is like, oh my God, let me just see if I can put this to words because it is massive, massive thing for people to pause and note. Not every single person is capable of doing that for you. But the
Yeah.
truth is, nobody can do that for you until you stop robbing yourself of the
Hmm.
opportunity to be loved and supported, which means that you, Steph, had to be willing with Blake, first and foremost, with yourself and then with Blake, to feel safe enough to say, I am flawed. I have these things that I think are not lovable. I need support. I need da 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 da. You can only accept and own and ask for those things once you've built up a degree of safety within yourself through
Hmm.
experiences. Because belief is one thing, like the idea of like, I believe that I am safe and I believe that da da da. No, experience that shows you I am going to be okay if this person says they can't give me those things
Yeah.
and I'm still going to ask for them because so many people like you were describing, they would rather have this pretend sense of acceptance and approval than to actually test out the theory and see whether they have the real deal. They'd rather
Yeah.
show up in a little bit of a false way and hide these things and go, oh, my partner really loves the way that I am and loves the way that I look and he supports me, blah, blah, blah. But you're never actually, it's almost like wearing a water bra and being like, my
Yeah.
partner loves my boobs. Deep down, you're always like, I don't know why I do this. Like, why a water bra? That's so
Yeah.
irrelevant to the theory, but you know what I mean. Deep down you're like, oh my gosh, but does he actually? Like, I don't actually know. And your ability to feel safe with yourself is what has made it so then you did find an amazing partner who is also
Hmm.
willing to give you those things. And again, that's not a given. Sometimes you are
Takes a lot of
incredibly
work.
honest and authentic, and then
Yeah.
the person says, that's too much for me. I'm not there yet in my own healing to know how to give you
Yeah.
what you deserve. Or the universe, God, whoever says, sorry, but I have someone better in store for you and I'm not going to let this
Mhm.
thing work out. But
Yeah.
again, it's not always a given that someone's going to be like Blake, but it is a given that if you're not like you and willing to be vulnerable and honest, which requires you to have built up a certain level of safety within yourself to even do that, then you can never have that because you'll always
Yeah.
rob yourself from truly knowing that someone truly has you. And you said, like, me and Blake have so much intimacy, the more intimacy than I've ever had in my entire relationship. I want to point out one of my favorite breakdowns of a word of intimacy being into me, I see. Of course, you and
Mm,
Blake have that. Look at the work that you've done to look into
yeah.
yourself.
I love that. I've never heard of that.
Into me.
But what you were just saying, like, I want to connect this all back together because I think what I see for myself, what I experienced, and this is what you and I worked on, was okay, let's just say you start doing inner work, and the first thing that you really start to see is that like I there's that lack of trust internally that you have. And people are like, well, what does that mean? Or like,
Mhm.
how is that coming out? That might be, you're really insecure or you feel like you can't do something, or maybe there's just something
Yeah.
blocking you from actually hitting like success. And that could be
Taking
literally
action.
going to the gym regularly, eating
Yeah.
well. It could be success doesn't have to be like I
Right.
started a $1 billion company because that's just not realistic for
Yeah.
most people. But the one thing that you and I worked on was another layer of this was keeping promises to yourself is the
Mhm.
best and assured way to build confidence within yourself.
Mhm.
Because when you can keep a promise to yourself, you now know I can rely on myself, which now turns into something way deeper than just, oh, I told myself I was going to go to the gym this morning. I went to the gym. You start to build in these thought patterns of, I actually say I'm going to do something and I'm going to do it. And
Mhm.
that builds your own internal character and your own internal point
Yeah.
of view of yourself. If you're someone who doesn't do that, never follows through, you start to literally talk shit to yourself. Like, yeah, of course I wouldn't. I'm a piece of shit. I don't do this and that, and that starts to tear down this own internal persona and your own self-worth, which we've done so much work on
Yeah.
self-worth. For me, that was so, so big. And like once you start to really believe in yourself and to build that worthiness through your own actions, and it can be as small as keeping a small promise to yourself. Like, I promise I'm going to do this because it's for the betterment of me and it makes me happy.
Mhm.
And it's not all easy. It's discipline. I mean, discipline isn't
Yeah.
I wake up every morning and I want to go and drink a gallon of water and go to the gym. It's no, I know it's best for me and I feel
Mhm.
my best even when I don't want to do it. But I
Mhm.
think that allows people then, if you can do that individually, it allows you then to be able to find that in a relationship or a friendship where you feel that trust, because it's like, I already know I can trust myself. I already know I believe in myself. I have this
Mhm.
confidence. And now it's like, if can I be with someone else, and have them see me. And if they don't see me that way, or I think some people have like that lack of trust or
Mhm.
issues, it's like, well, do you even trust yourself?
Yeah.
Do you even believe in
Exactly.
yourself? If you don't have that, it's hard to really feel that in a relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a great way because like you said, these kind of elusive ideas of like self-trust, self-love, like all these different things, and we're often taught, I
Mhm.
mean, I think at this point 2024 there's also been enough that's like self-love is not just bubble baths, like that's also gone around in its circuit,
Right.
but it still doesn't make it necessarily easier to fully define what these characteristics are. I think in large part because we are taught that good is good feeling and that
Yeah.
it always feels comfortable when it's right, and it's like this gut feeling. And I think our relationship as a society to discomfort is in large part why the state of the world is the way that it is, and why people in so many realms struggle, whether it's intimately with their bodies and relationships. But one really good way to kind of really expose your personal reality of self trust or self love is really thinking about, okay, let's break this down. First of all, we're the ones who are in a relationship with us our entire life. You're the only one that's
Right.
inside your head. You are the same person that you are going to have from the beginning of your life all the way to the end, and nobody else will take this route with you your entire life. Your parents who brought you into this world since day one will not still be there, probably at the end of your life, maybe in certain cases, unfortunately. But nobody usually takes the whole ride with us. And
Right.
so it's such a different degree of self trust that needs to be had within you. But even if we look at it at a reduced degree of just trust in a relationship, women specifically, just taking a moment to think, but it's not at all relevant to gender. But if you think about the way that these micro moments of a lack of security would do to your relationship, if you think about your partner not showing up when you said you'd show up, if you notice that he was like really wishy-washy, if you notice that like he acted in a really unattractive way when he didn't follow through with what he was doing, if he showed severe levels of insecurity and you couldn't feel like you could rely on him, would that be a relationship that you'd be turned on by? Would that be a relationship that you
Right.
felt safe with? And that's thinking, do I want to spend my life with this person? And
Yeah.
like you said, meanwhile, so many of us would never accept those type of treatments in a relationship because it would have us feeling crazy, and we'd always be complaining about this person who's so erratic and so not making us feel stable and confident. But we will accept that treatment from our own self, and sometimes
Mm.
it's vice versa. But I think that really helps expose the severity of a lack of self-trust. It's like, think about the way that you are treating yourself. How are you making yourself feel? Because the other side of that is comes back to the idea of self-worth, and it's very hard to be treated better than the way that you believe that you
See
deserve.
yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
you believe you. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen this in family where I'm like, why do you continually get treated like shit by
Yeah.
men? And it's like that person does not have the worthiness or
Yeah.
the self-love to be able to know the difference. And it's like you've said this to me. It's like you receive the love that you accept to receive, or however
Yeah.
that quote, I'm
You
butchering that,
believe
but
the
it's
love
like
that
you,
you believe you deserve. You
yeah,
receive the love that you
exactly.
believe you deserve. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think so much of that I could talk about, but it's like
Yeah.
I'm just so thankful that I'm able to have you as kind of that sounding board to also be able to work through these things. And I think that that was really the big point of this conversation that I wanted the audience to hear, because it's business, it's life, it's
Hmm.
emotion, it's relationship, but I'm like, any really happy person I know has done the inner work because they are happy authentically with who they are. And that's not to say that not every person is going to go through, trauma with a capital T, like you and I talk about. But
Right.
there's micro traumas. Everyone
Absolutely.
goes through stuff. Everyone has stuff that they have to deal with and they have to work through no matter what. So I do think therapy is actually good for everyone. I think
Yeah.
there's different levels of it, of
Hmm.
how you process, because for me, I am a talking person. I'm communication. So for
Yeah.
me, this is perfect. Others, it may be different, and I
Hmm.
don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that you're someone that you're always objective in a way that allows me to really see who I truly am, but also subjective because I love you and you love me. And we have
Yeah.
this relationship. But it's like that safe room where I feel like I can really be myself. We can open up and we can talk about these things. And I want the audience and you all to hear that no one is perfect, and it's okay if you're struggling, and it's okay if you're
Hmm.
like, I don't have this figured out. I have
Yeah.
stuff going on and it's a mess.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a really good time to do some checks and balances of what's going on internally for you so you can go into 2025 really working on your best self. And I swear the last 2 years doing that have been the best 2 years of my life.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. On that, I just want to say that there is no higher form of self love than building and creating and knowing you are worthy enough to build and create the life that you love. And to have
Mm,
that commitment of, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get myself to a better place, whatever that takes, is an ultimate act of self love, right? We dream about being with the kind of partner who would be like, I will do whatever it takes to give you
yeah.
your full life here. And another point that you made, and I'm really glad you highlighted, and this isn't just me like talking myself up by any means. It's something that I feel and I've experienced, I've put myself through, I've witnessed it so many times with clients, and you are the ultimate testimony for this work, is the fact that it's really hard for me to explain what it is that I do for a living and the way in which I work with my
Mm,
clients. I think reducing it to therapy has traditional connotations that the way that
yeah.
I work with clients expands so far beyond that. Like you said, there's a lot of business work. We've had seasons where we talk very, very in depth about health. That's all of those pieces come into it. They're components of, finance, of relationships, of all these different things. And it can kind of come across like, I can do it all. We talk about everything. But truly, root cause therapy does require you to have holistic well-being in your life, requires all those areas of your life, first of all. And second of all, when you truly love yourself and give yourself the life you desire, all of those pieces are included. And when you do the core work, every single area of your life is impacted. When you change your own relationship, your own story, when you look back and you literally upgrade your mental hardware from when you were a child, relationships are going to change. Your sex life's going to change. You're going to go through
Yep.
physical changes. They're manifesting different things in your physical body when you have psycho based traumas, psychology based traumas show up in the body. So it's just, I think we're going to have to do another session just literally highlighting your transformation alone that will bring this full circle. But it's like Steph
Yeah.
coming in at a place in her life where there was, and I feel like you're such an open person that you've already talked about these things, but like there
Yeah.
was relationships that were out of alignment, friendships that were out of alignment, career, money, physical body, so many
Hmm.
different elements that we've worked through within one container. Because when you get to those roots, we've addressed those things head on as well, very specifically, but also everything changes when you change at your absolute core.
Yeah, exactly. They're all connected. Like you said, there's this root under like a tree, and every single thing is connected between
Mhm.
health and, health and wellness, and then career, and then finances and relationally. It's
Mhm.
literally all one because you are one person.
Yeah.
And so now it's trying to figure out how to heal and magnify and work through things so you can just live at the most optimal level that you're supposed to live.
Mhm.
And I think in learning what that is for you, like we talked about this many times, like I think everyone has their journey and they where they are supposed to be and who they're want to be. Like we've done human design work, which Emma
Mhm.
also is incredible at. If you want human design, I'll put that plug in there right now. She's incredible at that. But it allows you to really realize, like, what is the life I'm supposed to actually live? Because I think so many have this
Yeah.
different persona of, everyone told me I was supposed to do this, or I go on TikTok and everyone's telling me that I need to be a millionaire by 30 and
Mhm.
I need to start 4 companies and I should be an entrepreneur and like fuck the 9 to 5. And that's just not true. Like, I think the 9 to 5 is great for a lot of people. And it's also brings so much joy for a lot of people. And also entrepreneurship can do the same. I think
Yes.
it just depends on who you are and where you are in your life and what you want out of life. And then there's some people who are like, I don't want to work at all and I want to work on a farm and make no money, but I'm super happy because
Mhm.
I don't care about any of that stuff. And so
Yeah.
I think it's so important to really do the work to figure out who you one are and who you're supposed to be, and
Yeah.
then you start to fulfill that through everyday action.
Yeah. What is going to make you satisfied with your one life? I mean, that
Yeah.
is what it all boils down to for me is such an intense, overwhelming reverence for this human existence. And it is so finite and it is so real. And if there's one thing that I could do, it's like intensely shake people up to realize like it's almost like nothing actually matters. Like you've got to go for it. We really have this one life as far as we know
Yeah.
to go all out. Who freaking cares about random people that you're passing by? Like you have to give yourself everything you can in this life. I'm so
Yeah.
like overwhelmingly intensely passionate about wanting to make sure that at the end of your life when you're 95 years old in a deathbed that you gave yourself a life that you are entertained by at 95 and that you're satisfied with, because it's not just
Yep.
like you get to the end of your life lacking that satisfaction and you go, oh shit, I fucked up my life, which is devastating. And the degree of depression in elderly people is starkingly high. That is not discussed enough. And it is in large part because of that. Regret is a very real thing, but it's also something that impacts you on a daily basis, even when you're 20, even when you're 30, even when you're in your 50s and 60s, and so on. So we just owe it to ourselves to go all out in this life. And I take it very seriously. And obviously, everyone I work with also takes it so seriously. You've got this one life. Like, let's fucking go for it.
I think that's the best way to end out on this episode, Emma. There's nothing that can top that because exactly, like fucking let's go for it. And I just wanted to thank you for being on. We
Yes.
obviously could do like a 20-part series,
Yes.
Emma and I. Um, every time we talk, it's like a therapy session with each other. And then also, now on here to share. So thank you so much for being on. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and follow Emma on Instagram. Can you tell everyone like your handle and where to find you, and if they want to
Yeah.
book any sessions with you as well, if you're accepting
Yep.
clients right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the best place for people to find me, this just sounds so silly. I just, every time it makes me laugh, but it's I am underscore Emma Lynn, and my DMs are open. I love chatting with people and like sending voice memos back and forth. I'm really, really passionate about this work in not, I will always make sure that it is right for someone first and foremost. So no one ever has to hesitate and be like, oh my God, if I start a conversation or whatever it is, it's like, no, that is not where I operate. If it is best for you, then I've got you, and
Yeah.
we have different options. I do offer human design sessions, like Steph said, as well as breakthrough sessions that are sort of that moment when you're like, phone a friend, I might need to want to totally re-strategize my life, I've got something specific that I'm going through that I need just like support on immediately. The goal of that is, a lot of people when they're in dire situations haven't pre-vetted a therapist or feel like they have that support, so that is always available one-on-one at a timely manner for people to get just that intense infusion of support and sort of re-strategizing, whatever that looks like. So that's always available for people. My 6-month container, which is a very, very intensive, is open, as well as weekly therapy sessions. I'm going to probably be doing a little bit of a deal for human design and breakthrough sessions for the holidays, and usually going into the holidays offer, which I don't usually do, but just regular therapeutic sessions for people who sort of
Yeah.
need extra support around the holiday time.
Especially during the holidays, they're tough
Yeah.
for a lot of people. So that's great.
Yeah, I like to sort of stand on standby for that. But I also have a website, emma-lynn.com. We're doing a lot of editing, but it is there. And yeah, people can just jump in the DMs, reach out to me if they have any questions. We can discuss that more, and we can do a consultation to see what would support you and if it would be a good match.
Thank you so much, Emma. You're the best. You are my friend, my partner in life, I feel like, and the best therapist ever. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing, our collective journey together, but also your wisdom. So I appreciate you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and stay tuned for
Hey,
our next episode.
thank you so much.